From the News Channel 5 Network, this is MorningLine with Nick Barris.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us on MorningLine. Nick Barris coming to you on a Monday. Hope you had a good weekend. Back in the saddle this week, kicking everything off. We're going to open up the phone lines and get your thoughts on things. I'm just looking at the calendar right now, getting the exact number of days. Counting today, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 days until finally Election Day is here. But for many of you, I think you've early voted, which is a huge factor this time around, you know, compared to 4 years ago, the number of people early voting and doing so by mail-in ballot and the like, a lot of it having to do with the pandemic, of course. So we're going to get into politics this morning, kind of taking a look back to Thursday, where the debate, of course, was here in Nashville at Belmont and how things went there. I think a significantly different debate, we'd all agree, compared to the first time around. And I think it went well in Nashville once again, and Belmont, I think, did a terrific job hosting it. And so we'll talk a little about that. Wouldn't mind getting some of your take on that. And then where we go from there. Since then, of course, yesterday was the 60 Minutes interviews. They do that every political election year with the president and vice president. And as you know, there was some drama around it with Leslie Stahl and President Trump, and we can go into a bit of that. And then, as I said, with 8 days tomorrow to the end until we finally get to November 3rd, can anything come up that can make a significant change to the way things are going, or is the die already cast one way or the other? How many undecideds out there? All those types of questions. And we'll get the phone number up there and invite you to sound off, join in the conversation. I'm not asking for you to call in and say, oh, vote Biden or vote Trump. I'm asking you to call in and maybe give me your take on where you think things stand and how things have gone. So to talk more about that this morning from over at Vanderbilt, it's Professor Thomas Schwartz. Good morning to you, sir. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning, Nick. Thank you for having me on the program.
Well, it's exciting, isn't it? I mean, gosh, the political season nowadays, as you well know, it almost starts the day after the election, and yet all this buildup and all the debates and everything as it goes, and here we are now, okay, all these, 3-4 years later, almost ready to vote. How do you feel about it all?
I feel like it's been a long 4 years. In a way, we've all been sort of hosts or viewers of the Trump reality show. He has dominated the headlines. The controversies around him have dominated things enormously. So it is quite it's been quite an eventful 4 years of time, and I think in many respects this election will be kind of a verdict on that particular performance by President Trump.
Yeah, and okay, so let's talk about the debate from Thursday, and some of our viewers may want to weigh in on it. The number on the screen, 737-7587. In terms of how that debate worked, that seemed a lot more like a traditional debate, certainly nothing like the first one that really kind of got out of hand. And I don't know, as you watch that debate, give me your takeaway from it. I know we've had a few days to let it digest in, and how you feel and whether or not you feel one side or the other, really scored more points.
Well, I do think you got, at least in that debate, some sense of the differences between the two parties. President Trump, who's talking about having turned the corner on coronavirus, the need to get the economy going, his own take on recent protests, his views on where the country is internationally and all the rest. And then you got Joe Biden, a very different view. And I think the fact is that maybe the presence of the mute button allowed us to hear both candidates. And so I think we got a good sense of the difference between the two, and both in their styles, manners, and to a large extent their policies. They are very different. They represent very different visions, very different ideas about what the country should be doing in the next 4 years.
Is that what you typically hope to get out of a debate? I mean, I don't know what you watch for. That's kind of, I don't mind the give and take and the confrontation part of it sometimes, as long as it remains respectful. And the first time around, it did not. But I kind of know where the candidates usually stand on the issues going into a debate, and I'm more interested in seeing them have to react in an unscripted, for the most part, format, and observing how they handle each other, and maybe just lay out some of their ideas. And that's kind of what I got this last time around.
Yes, I think so. I think there was a sense you got that President Trump was who he is, and Joe Biden, I think, basically came off as the person he is. I think there were some undertones here. One was, of course, would Trump control himself? Would he be able not to somehow disrupt the debate the way he did in the first one? And the other was, would Joe Biden really be as sharp as many people think he's lost a step? That he's not quite as mentally sharp now that he's almost 78 years old. So I think those were sort of undercurrents as well. Okay,
and would you agree the consensus afterwards, depending on your partisanship, you would say that, one side, some think, say President Trump came out on top, Joe Biden. If you were truly impartial, I'm not sure how you would come down on this, but I don't know that either side in this debate, that's what usually people watch for, right, scored a major point that made a big difference against the other. Do you?
Well, the one thing I would say about the debate is that Joe Biden's statement that he would phase out oil and gas did seem to have some repercussions, because they did immediately start dialing that back. And that's always an indication that at least there's some concern that a candidate may have gone too far. And that is, I think, something that's worth mentioning, simply because Trump so very much effectively highlighted it right away and said Pennsylvania, Texas, those places where there's significant oil production, that those were going to be areas that he had to be concerned with.
Yeah, and you're right. And Pennsylvania, of course, is one of those key swing states, correct?
Absolutely. Even Texas is now.
Texas. Yeah, what right now, and you can tell by where the candidates are traveling to over the last few days. What are we saying right now? Where are the really key swing states they think right now?
Well, I think Pennsylvania, obviously. I mean, the Biden campaign has invested quite a bit in that. He has constantly gone there. It's interesting that he's supposedly going to Georgia tomorrow. Georgia is a traditionally very Republican state, but they think it's in play. My own guess is that the key swing states are still the three states that put Donald Trump over in 2016, namely Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, that those three are still crucial to his thinking about how he's going to win this election. He'll probably go to others as well, like Arizona, maybe Nevada again. He may have to go back to Texas. The poll yesterday showed that it might be tied, or Biden might even be ahead. So I think there's going to be some interesting travels the next few days.
Yeah, but based on last time around, you and I both know, as far as polls are concerned, I just keep my head down and just observe what they're doing, and we'll wait and see when the count comes in. I just don't pay close attention to it. I know a lot of the politicians, and they do, and there's different polls out there. Now, with regard to affecting the voter count and the turnout and the number and all that, do you think last night's 60 Minutes piece has any bearing on it at all, as that comes right after the debate? And again, the big takeaway from that was more the confrontation kind of between Leslie Stahl and the president.
I don't really think that'll have a major impact. Obviously, people look at that, and if you're a Trump supporter, you tend to see it through the eyes that the media is again biased, and that Leslie Stahl took on the president much more aggressively than she did Joe Biden. So I'm not sure it changed many minds. It might have reinforced some views. You've mentioned already, Nick, that early voting has already hit record numbers. So many people have already voted. So things like the 60 Minutes expose really may not have much impact at all.
I guess that's what we need to get into in terms of, the fact that early voting, when we first sat down before the show, he and I get to talk a bit before we go on air. And the one question I asked, I think you and I both remember, back, 4 years ago, not just what was it? How many days was it before the election? Just right up against it. That's when a bunch of new information surfaced with regard to Hillary Clinton's emails and WikiLeaks releasing some things. And a lot of people felt if it was very close at that point, that final nudge really was what I think turned enough people off about Hillary and swayed the election at the very end there, at least with those electoral votes for the president. And so you just wonder if something like that could happen again between now and November 3rd. With either candidate.
With either candidate, and this is where the huge increase in early voting makes that much, much less likely. That there's just not enough votes really to be turned in most of the states. Remember, Trump won exceptionally narrow victory in the 3 states in the upper Midwest. So it's hard to see that would really make a great deal of difference. So the polls are farther apart this time. And so my sense is that it would you would need something really quite dramatic to have any real impact on the election.
That's what I would think. All right, listen, we're going to take a break on this. When we come back, 737-7587 is the number. I want to just throw this out there to the viewers, and I know that the professor would like to hear, if you're someone still kind of in the middle, and the other day on NPR I heard they talked to some folks that still, for whatever reason, aren't sure which way they're going to go. If you're in the middle, or if you've got an observation about the debate or what might happen over the next week before the election, I'd love to hear from you. You know, just sound off where you stand, whether you're, voting for President Trump and why, and if what swayed you that way, or if you've just stuck with him, or if you're someone who's saying, yes, it's going to be Joe Biden, I'm ready for a change. And especially if there's someone who voted one way or the other last election. Did you vote for Hillary Clinton, and this time around you're saying, I'm not voting Democrat, I'm going for this president, or vice versa? Are you someone who voted for President Trump last time around, and now, this time, no, you're going the other way? I'd love to hear from anyone. If you just want to sound off, we're open to opinions, try to get a better feel for where, at least in our viewing area, people feel, even though we know Tennessee is predominantly Republican. The number, 737-7587 is the number. We'll take a break and be back with more with the professor and your calls right after this.